The first time I saw it, I was 1100 light years from anything that mattered, and I was not a brave person. You should understand that about me before I tell you the rest. My people, the Veshrani, are not explorers. We are not warriors. We are scavengers. We follow the dead the way other species follow the living, and we have built an entire civilization out of the careful, patient stripping of things that have already stopped fighting. We do not take risks. A Veshrani who takes risks does not get to be old, and I had every intention of getting old. So when I tell you that I saw a ship that should not have been there, you will understand that I was not looking for adventure. I was looking for cargo. We were drifting at the edge of the Galactic current with our engines cold, listening. That is how you salvage. You go quiet, you go dark, and you let the graveyard come to you. And out of that dark, against the slow tide of 10,000 dead hulls, something moved the wrong way. A ship. Lights burning along its spine, white and steady, the way no derelict's lights should burn after 3 centuries. It was sailing against the current, sailing like it had somewhere to be. There was a figure standing at the forward viewport, small, human-shaped, watching us. And then I blinked and the ship was gone, not jumped, not cloaked, gone as if the dark had simply closed its hand. My instruments showed nothing, my crew showed nothing. Only I had seen it, and I have spent the rest of my life wishing I hadn't. That single moment tells you almost everything you need to know about the most feared object in this part of the galaxy. Almost. The rest of it took me a very long time, and a great deal of courage I did not know I had to understand. This is the full story of the human ship that would not die. Every species that works the Galactic drift knows the ship. None of us will say its name. We have 100 names for it instead, each one worse than the last, because to say the real one is to invite it. The Hutathi call it the Pale Lantern. The salvage clans call it the Widow. The youngest crews, the ones who have not yet seen it, call it nothing at all, just that, and they spit when they say it 3 times to keep it off their hulls. But the legend is always the same, no matter who tells it. A human vessel, ancient beyond reckoning, that appears out of the deep current with its running lights burning and a single soul standing at the bow. It never docks. It never lands. In 300 standard years it has touched no port, answered no proper hail, accepted no rescue. It simply sails on and on through a graveyard where everything else has long since accepted that it is dead. And here is the part that made grown salvage masters refuse the richest contracts of their lives. Every fleet that ever closed on it was lost. Not damaged, not driven off. Lost. Crews that went looking for the Widow did not come back to tell anyone what they found. I am, as far as I know, the only one who went looking and returned. So I will tell you what I found. I will tell you what the ship was and what it carried, and why I have not slept a whole night through since. And I will tell you the one thing that no story about it ever gets right, which is that it was never the dead you should have been afraid of. It was what one of the living was willing to do for them. To understand the Widow, you have to understand the place it haunts. The Galactic drift is not a region. It is a current, a slow river of disturbed gravity that runs for thousands of light years through dead space, and like any river it carries debris. For 10 million years it has gathered the wreckage of everyone foolish enough to die near it. War fleets, colony arcs, mining barges, whole armadas that lost their engines and were simply swept in, turning end over end forever. It is the largest ship graveyard in the known galaxy, and it is where my people make our living. You do not salvage the drift the way you salvage anywhere else. The dead here are stacked 1,000 deep, ground together by the current into reefs of broken metal. You go in small. You go in quiet. You find a hull that still has something worth taking, a fusion core, a stasis vault, a hold full of pre-collapse alloys, and you strip it fast and you get out before the reef shifts and crushes you. It is patient, frightening, profitable work, and I was very good at it. There was only one rule that every salvage clan agreed on, written in no contract but obeyed by all. You do not touch the Widow. You do not approach it. If you see its lights, you cut your engines and you pray to whatever your people pray to, and you do not move until it has passed. Which was a problem, because the Widow was, by every estimate, the single most valuable wreck in the entire drift. A human warship of the Lost Era carried cold fusion cores worth more than most of my clan would earn in 3 lifetimes. Everyone knew it. Everyone wanted it. And for 300 years, no one had been insane enough or greedy enough to take it. That was about to change, and I am ashamed to tell you that the one who changed it was me. The first sighting on record is 304 years old, and I have read the original log a dozen times, because it is the only piece of this story that everyone agrees actually happened. It comes from a human war fleet, the people themselves before they vanished from this region, pulling back from a battle they had lost. Their own ship, a cruiser of the Meridian class, had taken a killing blow. Reactor breached, drive dead, hull opening to the black. The fleet commander, a woman named Captain Idris Hale, gave the only order the situation allowed. She logged the Meridian as lost with all hands and ordered it abandoned. That should have been the end of it. A dead ship in a dead war, swept into the drift like 10 million before it. Except that it was not the end, because in the months that followed, other human ships kept logging the Meridian intact, lit, under power, moving against the current. The fleet had marked it dead with every hand aboard, and yet here it was, sailing as if it simply had not received the message, as if it refused to. The humans, before they left this region forever, gave it a designation in their reports that the translators have argued over for centuries. The closest any of us can render it is the ship that would not accept it. Accept what the logs never say. The order, the verdict, the death, all 3 maybe. And that is where the legend was born, not in horror, but in a single stubborn fact that no one could explain. A ship had been told by the highest authority it had that it was finished, and it had said no. Think about what that does to a story over 300 years. Each species that swept through the drift added its own fear to it. Until the simple, unexplained fact at the bottom, a ship that would not stop, was buried under ghosts and curses and warnings. We forgot there was ever anything human about it at all. I would be the one to remember. I want to be honest about why I went. There was no noble reason. There was only a number. A buyer on the Hutathi Rim, I never learned their real interest, and I no longer want to put out a standing contract for an intact human cold fusion core. The figure they offered was obscene. It was the kind of figure that ends a salvage master's career, in the good way, the way that lets you buy a quiet moon and never go dark and silent in a graveyard again. It was, in other words, exactly enough to make a careful person stop being careful. I told my crew where the core was coming from. I watched the color drain out of every one of them. "You mean the lantern," said my engineer, a steady old Veshrani named Sale who had never refused me anything in 30 years. "Say you don't mean the lantern." I did not say it. "Say the name, then," said my pilot. "Say which ship. If you can't say it, we're not going." I could not say it. And here is the thing you have to understand about my people, the thing that follows this whole story like a shadow. We are deeply, helplessly superstitious, and we know it, and we cannot stop. From the moment I gave the heading, my crew began to ward the ship. They painted the old signs on the airlocks. They spoke the warding words at every shift change. They refused, every single one of them, to say the name Meridian aloud, and instead invented new names for it as we got closer, each one more frightened than the last. By the time we reached the deep current, it was no longer the Widow or the Lantern. It was the Quiet One. Then Grandmother. Then, finally, when we saw its lights on the long-range scope, my pilot would only point and whisper, "Her." And the wardings did not work. That is the part that frightened them most. Every sign they painted, every word they spoke, and still her lights grew closer on the scope, steady and white and patient, until there was no pretending we had not found exactly what we came for. We were not the first to come looking. I knew the stories. As we closed the distance, I made myself remember them, the way you press on a wound to be sure you are still awake. There was the pirate crew, 2 centuries back, a real one, blood-handed reavers who feared nothing that bled. They found the widow and boarded her in force, 40 strong, to take her cores. Their ship was found later, drifting, perfectly intact. Empty. Every airlock sealed from the inside. No bodies, no damage, just 40 sets of armor laid out in the cargo bay in neat rows, as if someone had undressed the dead and put them gently to bed. There was the rival broker, a Veshrani named Kor who I had known and disliked, who decided that superstition was for the weak and the widow was just metal. He took 3 ships in. 2 came back. The crews of those 2 would never speak of what they saw, but Kor's own ship did not return, and Kor, who I tell you again feared nothing, was never the same. He gave away his fortune. He went to a temple moon. He spends his days now, I am told, writing the same human word over and over on the walls of his cell. We do not know the word. It is not in any of our languages. And there was the religious order, the worst of them, who came not to rob the ship but to cleanse it, to exorcise the thing they were certain it was. 40 priests in a consecrated hull, singing the old binding songs, sure that their faith would do what fusion lances could not. They found the widow. They sang their songs. And whatever answered them, they fled it so fast they tore their own drive apart, and the survivors disbanded the order and burned its records and refused, to a soul, to ever say what they had heard singing back. I knew all of this. Every story said the same thing in the end. The widow does not fight you. She does not have to. She simply does something to everyone who comes, something none of them can bear to describe. I gave the order to board anyway. I have asked myself 10,000 times why. The honest answer is the worst one. It is that I wanted the money more than I feared the ghost. I am not proud of that. But it is the only reason that brought me there, and so it is the reason that, in the end, let me learn the truth. The first thing that was wrong was that she answered. We hailed her the standard salvage call, the legal one, the "This wreck is claimed" warning you broadcast so no one disputes your salvage. And the Meridian answered, not with silence the way a dead ship answers, with a voice. It was old beyond old, a recorded human voice, a woman's, worn thin by 3 centuries of repetition, looping the same words over and over on every channel at once. The translators caught it on the 3rd pass. This is the Meridian. We are bringing them home. Do not interfere. We are bringing them home. That was all, over and over in a voice that had stopped sounding like a recording and started sounding like a prayer. My crew heard it and went pale and silent, and Sale, my steady old engineer, put down his tools and said he would not board, that nothing in the contract was worth this, and 2 others stood with him. I did not argue. I have never blamed them. They were right to be afraid. The second thing that was wrong was the hull. As we came alongside, our lights crawled over her skin, and I understood why she had survived 300 years in a current that grinds armadas to dust. She had been repaired, constantly, endlessly. Her hull was a patchwork of 100 other ships, Hutathi plating, Veshrani alloy, sections from species I could not even name, all of it scavenged from the dead around her and welded on by hand, layer over layer, scar over scar. She had been cannibalizing the graveyard for 3 centuries to keep herself whole. And the third thing that was wrong, the thing that made my own warding words die in my throat, was that the welds were fresh. Some of them were days old. Something on that ship was still working, still patient, still bringing the dead in and laying their metal over her wounds. A dead ship does not repair itself. A ghost does not weld. I should have run. Every careful instinct I had ever survived on screamed at me to cut loose and go. Instead, I stood at my own airlock, looking across the dark at a ship that had been told it was dead for 300 years and had spent every one of those years answering no. And for the first time since I was 1,100 light years from anything that mattered, I stopped being afraid of it. I started needing to understand it. I went across. Inside there were no ghosts. That is the thing I most need you to hear. There were no ghosts. There was only order. I had boarded 1,000 dead ships in my life, And they are all the same: the silence, the drift, the slow disintegration, the sense of a place that has given up. The Meridian had given up nothing. Her corridors were lit. Her air was clean. Her gravity held. The deck plates had been scrubbed, the conduits maintained, the hull breaches sealed from the inside with the same patient handwork I had seen outside. Someone lived here. Someone had lived here for a very long time and had refused the entire time to let the dark in. And then I found the hold, and I understood what the ship had been doing for 3 centuries, and I had to brace myself against the wall. It was a stasis vault, vast, running the length of the ship's spine, and it was full. Hundreds of pods, rank on rank, each one frosted and humming and alive with the slow, cold light of working cryo. I walked the rows. I read the names, for there were names, every pod hand-labeled, the human script worn and re-inked a dozen times over the centuries. And these were not all human names. There were Hutathi names, Veshrani names, the names of the pirate crew. The names, I would later realize, of the Broker Corps' lost ship, and the priests of the burned order, and every other soul who had ever come to rob or cleanse the widow and been thought destroyed. They were not destroyed, they were here, frozen, tended, kept. The widow had not been killing the ones who came for her. She had been collecting them, pulling their dead and their dying from the wrecks of their own ships, sealing their bodies in her endless hold, labeling each one by hand. And around them, woven through the whole hold, were the logs handwritten in a dozen scripts on every surface. Years of them. Decades. A record of the dead, who they were, where they came from, kept by someone who could not bear for a single one of them to go unnamed. I was reading the name on a pod when a voice behind me, a real voice, not a recording, cracked and quiet and human, said, in trade tongue she had clearly taught herself from her own captives. You're standing in front of my navigator. Please don't touch him. He doesn't like to be touched. I turned around, and I met the only living soul aboard the most feared ship in the galaxy. Her name was Mara Adami, and she was the last of the Meridian's original crew, and she was 304 years old. She had been a junior officer, barely more than a child by human reckoning, on the day Captain Hale logged the ship as lost and ordered it abandoned. And here is what the legend never knew, the small human fact at the bottom of 3 centuries of fear. When the order came to abandon ship, the Meridian still had crew aboard, wounded, dying, in stasis pods that could not be moved fast enough. The fleet was fleeing. There was no time. The order was, leave them, mark them lost. Save the living, abandon the dead and the nearly dead, and run. Mara Adami was 19 years old, and she had given her word to the ones in those pods that she would get them home. So she did the thing that 19-year-olds do, the thing that no fleet command and no rational species could account for. She said no. She stayed. She let the fleet go without her. She got the reactor stable, got the cryo running, and she set a course for the human homeworld alone on a ship that had been declared dead. And she promised the people in the hold, the ones who could no longer hear her, that not one of them would be left behind. The homeworld was very far away. The current was very strong. The repairs never ended. And the years, the way years do, simply went by. I couldn't carry them fast, she told me, sitting small among her pods, her hands never quite still. But I could carry them, so I learned to last. Cryocycle, wake, repair, cryocycle again. A year sleeping for every month awake. It adds up slow. She almost smiled. I'm patient now. I wasn't before. And the others, the pirates, the brokers, the priests, they came to take my crew, she said simply. I couldn't let them, but they died, most of them, in the trying their own ships, not me. I never had a weapon, so I did the only thing I knew how to do. She looked down the endless rows. I brought them home too, all of them. It seemed wrong to do less. That is what 300 years of legend had turned into a curse. That is the something none of the survivors could bear to describe, not a horror, but a girl who would not stop, surrounded by the dead of everyone who had ever feared her, keeping every single one of them by name. They had fled her because they could not understand her. There is nothing in the galaxy more frightening than a kind of love you have no word for. She was dying when I found her. She knew it. The cryo was failing, 300 years is past what any pod was built for, and the homeworld was still a lifetime away. And for the first time since she was 19, Mara Adami was going to break her promise. Not because she had given up, because her body was finally, after 3 centuries of refusing, going to make her. And here is where I have to tell you the worst thing about myself, and then the only good thing. I had come for her cores. The contract was still live. The money was still obscene. I stood in that hold with the most valuable salvage in the galaxy powerless and dying in front of me, and every instinct of my careful, profitable people told me to take what I came for. She could not have stopped me. She had no weapon. She never had. I thought about the broker core, writing his one human word over and over on a temple wall. I think now I know what the word was. I think he saw exactly what I saw and had no way to hold it, and it unmade him. I am not a brave person. I told you that at the start. But I found, standing there, that I could not take the cores. And worse, far worse for a Veshrani, I found that I could not leave, because she had a route. She had 300 years of careful navigation through the deep current, a course for home, and she was about to die with it unfinished, and I had a working ship and a crew and the one thing she had run out of, which was time. So I did the unthinkable. I did the thing my whole species exists not to do. I voided the contract. I gave up the money, and I asked an old human woman if she would let a scavenger help her carry her dead the rest of the way home. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "I taught your language to a navigator from a ship that came to rob me. He never woke up to hear it. I always wondered who I'd really learned it for." And she put her thin hand against the pod beside her, the one with her captain's name on it, and she said, "We are bringing them home. All of you can help. None of you can interfere." My crew thought I had lost my mind. Sale told me so. Then Sale, my steady old engineer who had refused to board, looked into that hold full of the named and tended dead, and he picked up his tools, and he started repairing her hull alongside mine. We brought them home. It took the rest of Mara Adami's life and a good part of mine. She lived to see the homeworld. I made sure of that, pushed my engines past every rating, burned out cores I'd have killed for a month before, because a promise she'd kept for 300 years was not going to fail in the last light year while I was watching. She stood at the forward viewport, the same place I had seen a small human silhouette on the night this all began, and she watched her world come up out of the dark, blue and impossible and exactly where she had left it. And she said the words one last time, not to me, not to anyone living. "We're home. I told you I'd get you home." She did not last long after that. The patient ones rarely do once they finally let themselves stop. We unloaded the hold together, my crew and I, every pod, human and Hutathi and Veshrani and all the rest, every name she had inked and re-inked for 3 centuries, handed over to people who had given up grieving a dozen generations ago. The pirates went home. The priests went home. The broker corps' lost crew went home. None of their descendants understood it. All of them wept. We buried Mara Adami on her homeworld beside her captain with the rest of her crew. The meridian we left in orbit, lights burning the way she liked them. It still answers hails, they tell me. Still loops the old recording on every channel. But the message is different now. Someone changed it at the end. It does not say "do not interfere" anymore. It says "they're home. Thank you for helping, they're home." And now you know why no fleet that found the widow ever came back to tell the story. It was not because she destroyed them. It was because every soul who ever truly understood what was aboard that ship found that they could not, afterward, go back to the lives they had led before. You cannot watch someone carry their dead for 300 years and then return to a graveyard and call it a living. It ruins you for scavenging. It ruined me. My people measure strength by what we can take from the dead. I spent my whole life believing that. And then a 19-year-old who said no to the death of everyone she loved taught me, 300 years too late to thank her properly, the thing that humans seem to be born knowing and the rest of us have to be broken to learn. The strong are not the ones who know what to take. They are the ones who know what they will never, under any circumstances, no matter how long it takes or what it costs, agree to leave behind. I am old now. I got my wish. I never go dark and silent in the drift anymore. But when I cannot sleep, and I cannot most nights, I look up toward the deep current, and I think about a ship that was told it was dead and answered no for 300 years, and I am not afraid of it anymore. I only hope that when my time comes, someone says it about me, that he would not leave them behind. If you ever work the Geralt drift, and you see white lights moving against the current, do not run. Do not ward your hull. Do not invent a worse name for her. Say the real one, she earned it. The Meridian. And if you have the courage the rest of us lacked for 300 years, go and ask if she needs help bringing anyone home. There is another story like this one on the far side of the dark about a colony ship that should not have survived and the one engineer who would not let it die. That one is on your screen now. Stay, if you can bear to. These are the only stories worth telling.